welcome back. As you can see, I got a kind of a different mic setup right now. And Monty's here. Hey, say hi, Monty.
Hi, Monty.
He's thrilled. Anyway, so welcome to the last three chapters. Yep, chapter 22, 23. That's the two we're going to be covering this week. And then last week you'll be covering chapter 24. So, yeah, crazy. Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there, guys. It's week 6. So we're heading to the end very rapidly. You've almost made it. You can do it. You can do it. Push it out. Yay! All right. So this week we're going to be talking about one of the only systems that you do not need to live, which is your reproductive systems. So chapter 22 is going to be discussing the two reproductive systems, where I get to, completely poke fun at both boys and girls. Because, I'm an equal opportunity crazy person that teaches these things. And on top of that, in chapter 23, we're going to be talking about development. So what happens when you get pregnant and how we develop over time and how we go from babies to adults, but kind of in an abbreviated way. Because we kind of have been talking about this throughout the entire semester, especially at the end where we talk about age-related changes and whatnot. So we did talk about pregnancy and development in chapter 23. And then in chapter 24, just to give you a little bit of a look ahead, we will be discussing genetics and genomics, which is actually very important. And I wish I had more time going over them because they're extremely interesting. But unfortunately, if you want more on genetics and genomics, I would highly recommend taking a genetics class, which I don't think Blue Ridge offers. But they are really interesting. I need to take a new genetics course myself because, goodness gracious, the one I took 20 years ago is probably so outdated that I really need an update on my own understanding of genetics and genomics. It doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. It just means that there's been some new things, and I probably could use an updating myself and me going, because I try to stay on top of things as much as humanly possible, but things slip. You know how this is. So anyway, and if you hear my son shouting in the background, yeah, he's playing Roblox with his friends, I think. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about reproduction, the only system you can live without. So before we get into reproductive system, there's a few terms I'd like you to know before we move on. This is probably hopefully a trip down memory lane. If not, okay. And anyway, so remember, sex cells in science are known as gametes. We don't just straight up say sex cells unless we're saying ovum and sperm. And on top of that, we usually just say gametes, gametes, gametes. This was something that, I drill into my high schoolers all the time in their biology classes because they don't say sex cells on the EOC, or the end of course test. They say gametes. So, and then always predictably, I had one student who was out, the several days I went over this, and then when it would raise their hand, I'd walk over and they'd be like, "What's a gamete?" And when you're giving the EOC, you can't tell them anything, and you just go use your best guess and walk away and then smash your face into the desk. Anyway, so male sex cells or gametes are called sperm. Female sex cells or gametes are called oocytes or ovum or egg cells. Actually, oo means egg and cyte means cell. So literally the term oocyte or oocyte means egg. So, egg cells is a bit redundant. Anyway, to produce these guys, we use a specialized version of reproductive cells, which is what we call meiosis, which is similar to mitosis, except it's so nice, we do it twice to get a reduction, because gametes are the only cells in your body that has half the chromosomes that a regular body does. And so that brings us to this. So our regular body cells, from our hair to our toenails, to our lung cells, to our heart cells, to everything in between, with the exception of our gametes, are all known as somatic cells. And within a human somatic cell, we have 46 total chromosomes. We get half from mom, half from dad. 23 from mom, 23 from dad. This is why we are known as diploid. In other words, we have a full number of chromosomes, the most any species should have. For us humans, it's 46. There's a type of fly that only has 11. And it just depends in between. It's actually interesting to look up how many chromosomes each species has. Sometimes I just do it like, how many chromosomes do a cat have? I think horses have like 30. Anyway, I'll have to look that up. Actually, I might make that a question. Go look up your favorite animal's amount of chromosomes. Or if you have a couple different types. Anything that interests you. So anyway, the symbol for diploid is 2N or N. Or 2N or 2N. It just depends on if it's capitalized or not. I don't know why, but it's always 2N. So anyway, now, that's most of your cells. And most of your cells, all of your somatic cells with the exception of your neurons, remember your neurons can't go through this because they're just way too specialized, go through mitosis, where we basically make an identical daughter cell. So here's mitosis, the parent cell, DNA replicates and then splits into two identical daughter cells. We went over this in 168, or hopefully you went over this in 168. So gametes are haploid because they only have half the total number of chromosomes that somatic cells do, which is 23 in humans. So we have to go through meiosis, which basically is mitosis twice. So we go through first round and then we go through second round. And then we should add up with 4 daughter cells that have half the number of half the number of chromosomes that the original parent cell did. So if you start out with 46, each one of these should have 23. Boop, boop, boop. Okay? And that's how we randomly generate 4 gametes with randomly half of your genetics that you can pass on to make a kid. And those are known as haploid because they have half. Hap actually means single, but I always think because hap and half starts with H, therefore it's half. It's just, it makes more sense in my mind, even though, I'm sorry, Monty, I didn't see your head there. My bad. So meiosis is the process in which the gametes are made. I'm not going to go into mitosis 1 and all that fun stuff and what happens in it in mitosis 2 and whatever happens in that, which is, stuff. But just know that basically it goes from a parent cell with 46 total chromosomes, splits once, and then, so these two have 46, and then it splits again into 4 haploid daughter cells that each have 23 for us humans. Okay? So now for the guys though, you make 4 sperm every time you do this in your testes. For us ladies, we actually get really selective with ours, and for every 4 of these, we only make 1 egg. So yeah, eggs are actually biologically more expensive than sperm. Sperm are on the same bioenergetic level of skin cells because you guys are constantly making them. So yeah, weird, huh? So anyway, yeah, we get super selective. Us ladies are picky. Let's face it, you guys, you know it. Picky ladies. So we make, for every 4 of these, we make 1 egg cell and 3 polar bodies. And we'll talk more about that when I start picking on the ladies on the lady side. So again, if you need to be, refreshed on what meiosis is, I would highly recommend going back and watching the crash course on meiosis where he goes over it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because, like I said, this hopefully was a concept you have seen before. If not,
reproduction. Always about.
If not, watch a crash course. He'll give you a crash course in it. So there's a couple of things that happens during meiosis that we need to talk about, which is good and bad. And we'll see this again in chapter 24 when we talk about genetics and genomics, because this can be good things and bad things happen with this. So the first thing, this is a good thing, and it's called crossing over. DNA is sticky, which is actually really cool and something that we use to our advantage a lot. So because DNA is kind of sticky, when all the chromosomes line up in the cellular equator during, the metaphase portion, sometimes they get a little jiggly and touch each other. And what they do, they'll swap entire genes. And this creates more genetic variation among organisms. So when these things are splitting out, it's really, really random what you're giving off to your kid. I mean, like crazy random. So not only is it random from just how it's splitting normally, it gets even more random when they touch each other, and all of a sudden you have, chromosome or genes on chromosomes that usually aren't there. And this happens all the time, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This leads to genetic variation among organisms, which is extremely important for survival. Now, the opposite of this, well, it's actually not the opposite of this, but it's because DNA is sticky that sometimes these guys don't separate like they should. As I showed you in the slide before, like, oh no, don't do that. Oh no.
Reproductive.
Stop it. Hank, stop reproducing. Anyway, so instead of splitting out like it should, sometimes the DNA stays stuck together instead of splitting out properly. This is known as non-disjunction. And in us humans, this is very, very bad. This is where we get trisomies and also monosomies, which monosomies are worse than trisomies. Trisomies is when we get an extra chromosome, and that's not good for us. This is where Down syndrome comes from. There's also something called trisomy 13, which I go into later in chapter 24, that this is something that if you get pregnant, this is one of the first things you are instantaneously tested for is trisomy 13. Because if you have trisomy 13, the baby will not make it. It will not go through a full pregnancy. It aborts. It's not fun. And you're pretty much looking at a non-viable pregnancy if it doesn't kill you. So you have to make some hard decisions. And so anyway, non-disjunction. This is bad in humans. It leads to things like trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome. It leads to other trisomies. Also leads to monosomies. Because as you can see, there's some right here that just do not whatsoever have any. So that means you actually come out with less than 46 chromosomes. And in those cases, a lot of times they don't even happen. Fertilization doesn't even occur. If you don't get a full 46 when the egg and the sperm merge, fertilization sometimes doesn't even occur. It's just like we don't have all the instructions, so nothing happened. So, the sperm and the egg could meet and nothing happens. If it has too much, it still will go. That's what a trisomy is. But like I said, some trisomies aren't great. Monosomies are worse. And we'll talk more about that when we get into chapter 24. But it is things to keep in mind. Now, in plants, non-disjunction is good. It makes the giant strawberries. So if you ever, bought huge strawberry chocolate dipped strawberries and the strawberries are like the size of your fist. Yeah, that's because we purposefully ran the plant through non-disjunction. And some plants love non-disjunction and it makes just bigger fruits. Weird, isn't it? So yeah, bad for us, good for plants. Weird. Science is weird. Anyway, so let's talk about the guys. So no offense, guys, I'm going to pick on you first, and then I'm going to pick on us ladies, because, I'm all about equal opportunity picking on both sexes, because you know how it is. So anyway, testes are the primary male sex organs which produce sperm and male sex hormones. So testes originate as retroperitoneal masses of tissue near the kidneys. So they start developing back near where the kidneys are, closest, and then they actually get pulled down, which is kind of neat. So about 7 to 8 months of gestation, the testes move through the abdominal wall to the scrotum. So in other words, they're up here and they get developed. And it's interesting because you'll see this again when we talk about us ladies, that our ovaries develop in the same place. Except the guy's testes then get pulled down through this thing called a gubernaculum, which is basically a string that goes up and actually pulls this sucker down into the testes. The descent is stimulated by testosterone. And the fibromuscular cords called the gubernaculum pull the testes in developing vas deferens and blood vessels through the inguinal canal into the scrotum. Now, why do the testes like to live in the scrotum? Because of heat. The heat at which the human body is actually, usually hanging out at, which is 98.6, is bad for sperm. It doesn't like to be that hot. And so therefore, that's why we have a scrotum. That's why it hangs down off the body, is for temperature regulation. Because it doesn't want to sit around at 98.6. It wants to sit around at whatever temperature that I just forgot. And to do that, to regulate it, is why, when it get cold, the old guys like to nestle up a bit, and when it gets hot, they like to, fall down away from the body to get away from the heat, so you don't damage your own sperm production. Anyway, now the vas and the blood vessels are part of the adult spermatic cord, so it's a kind of interesting. I just find it really fascinating how things move down, and then like literally we have a fibromuscular cord that pulls everybody down into the area they're supposed to be at. So I just think this is interesting. Now, I'm going to talk about a little later in this section is that there is a type of, there actually are people that are born without this happening. So they're actually born looking like a female, and it isn't until they hit puberty that they start to actually turn into a male. And they're small populations. We're going to talk about them, and it's kind of a weird thing. It's kind of neat, and it's because of the testosterone actually gets disrupted at an early age. So this part doesn't really finish off going through everything until the testosterone is increased, which happens in puberty, and all of a sudden the balls drop and literally what you thought was a girl turns into a boy. So yeah, talk about sex changes, which is another hot button topic at the moment. There's in some places Mother Nature doesn't give you a choice. It just goes, oh, we mucked up, you're a boy now. More so than usual. So if you thought puberty was bad, wait till I talk about these folks. Oh yeah, here they are, the Reproductive of the Dominican Republic. There's also other places in the world too that also has these populations. So in the Dominican...
And everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Hello again. Sorry about that. My cats decided to have one of those, run around, act like goobers, and knocked everything off my desk in the middle of recording. So therefore, sorry about that. All right, so the Guavidosis of the Dominican Republic. Basically what's going on here, as I was mentioning earlier, what happens is not enough testosterone is generated while the baby is in vitro. There's another hormone for whatever reason that is actually blocking it for some strange reason in these populations. And we're still studying it. It's actually really fascinating. I have a video about it, but it's so short and weird that it doesn't really get the point through. But PBS did a whole thing on it as part of a genetic series they did, which was really cool. And so long story short, yeah, these folks are born, and pretty much these people just, are raised as female. They're raised as female until they hit puberty, when finally the testosterone that's being generated in their body overcomes that other hormone that's blocking it. And all of a sudden their testes descend, their penis develops, and they literally turn into a guy. Which is insane. So yeah, literally these people are raised as females until they hit puberty, and whoop, all of a sudden they're a guy. Isn't that crazy? Wow. Anyway, so yeah, I thought that was interesting, and I thought it would bring that up because yeah, Mother Nature can be quite a trip sometimes. So anyway, so let's talk about the testes. So these are ovoid structures held within the scrotum outside the body due to heat. Each testes is divided into lobules. Each lobule contains seminiferous tubules, interstitial cells of Leydig, because, the seminiferous tubules unite and give rise to the epididymis, which is right here, which is basically a maturing area for the sperm. And then we've got accessory organs such as the epididymis, which also storage for mature sperm, the vas deferens, which is basically where it goes to leave, and the seminal vesicles, which is fructose for sperm energy, because the sperm need a lot of energy to motor where they need to go. Because they have one job, and there's a reason why guys make a ton of these things. So what's happening is up in these seminiferous tubules right here are basically, and you're going to see this in a minute, is these stem cells for sperm. So they're constantly making sperm right here. But the sperm has to actually mature. So they kind of go out after they're released and they go down here and then they get into the epididymis. So the epididymis kind of does two things. As the sperm is going down through these lobules into the epididymis, it is maturing. So it's kind of like a maturing / waiting area for the sperm. So this is basically where everybody hangs out, ready to go when it's time to go and when they're ready for it. So these guys in the back here are still maturing, and by the time it comes around and goes back out and it's time to be released, these guys are mature and ready to go. So yeah, actually, like, a fine wine, sperm too needs to mature. And if these cats run around again, I'm going to have words. Anyway, but you know how it is. Cats. So as you can see right here, again, if you kind of zoom in on the cross-section of one of these tubules, so you can see right here the Sertoli cell, which is basically helping, make these guys, but you've got your germinal cell right here. It goes through meiosis 1, meiosis 2, and for every one of these, it splits into 4 spermatozoa. And then they go out, and like I said, they hang out and come out into the epididymis, where, like I said, they mature, and then finally leave through the vas deferens. Okay? All right. So, now, how does it go from there? This is where we come into the prostate gland and the bulbouretherial glands and everything, because these guys actually add something as the sperm is leaving, because the sperm actually needs help to get where he's going. Because, like I said, these guys are extremely, they need energy, which is where basically all that, fructose comes from. Test question. On top of that, it also needs, some changing in the pH, so that way it can survive, especially if you're trying to make a baby and it needs to survive inside the woman's body, because the woman's body actually turns into quite the hostile place. Gee, surprise. Anyway, so the surrounds the ethereal, so the prostate glands was the urethra below the bladder, and it secretes a milky alkaline fluid which enhances sperm motility. So basically this guy is like, hey, let me make you an alkaline fluid so that way when you hit more acidic places, you're protected so you can keep going. Then you've got these guys right here and the urogenital diaphragm. These little guys right here, these are the bulbouretherial glands. And basically those guys secrete lubrication for the penis, and they're right beneath the prostate. So basically what semen is made of is sperm cells from the testes, alkaline fluids from the prostate, so that way it can live, it can survive in other environments, fructose, so it has energy to, move and, wiggle its tail from the seminal vesicles, and lubricant from the bulbouretherials, so that way he's got basically his own moving environment to keep all the sperm happy and whole until they get into hopefully a woman to impregnate, but, it is what it is. So you got the scrotum, which is the pouch of skin and subcutaneous tissue that encloses the testicles. You got the cremaster muscle, is an extension of the internal oblique that elevates the scrotum during sexual arousal and upon exposure to cold. You actually can train to control that sucker. There are karate people before they made the cup, for sports and stuff to protect the family jewels downstairs and whatnot. There are people that trained in China, karate masters, to actually suck the scrotum back up into their pelvis. Yeah, So, yeah. Did some weird things before we invented the cup, I guess. Anyway, penis, this is a male excretory organ. It is specialized to become erect for insertion into the vagina during sexual intercourse. The cylindrical body is composed of 3 columns of erectile tissue completely surround the urethra. Now, the penis structure, it's basically a pair of dorsally located corpus cavernosa, whose curia, or legs, are attached to the pubic arch. Single corpus spongium, which extends at the distal end to form the enlarged glands, penis, and large proximal end of the form of the bulb of the penis deep in the perineum. The curia and the bulb are covered by muscles, and each column is surrounded by a tough capsule of white fibrous connective tissue called the tunica albumica. excuse me. And there's a loose fold of skin called the prepuce, which covers the glands as a sheet. Now, usually we remove this by circumcision. And that's always something, if you're having a son, or if you ever decide to have kids in the future, that is a major discussion you have to have with your partner. Me and my husband agonized over whether or not to get Wesley a circumcision. And we went ahead and did it because we did, and I'm just saying this because, you know, it's one of those things where it's like you're doing something to alter your child's body before they have consent. And some people are 100% against this. Like, I myself am not a fan of people getting their baby's ears pierced because it's just one more thing I have to worry about on my baby. But, you know, to each their own. You do you. But also they can't consent. Again, and we agonized over this. And so we talked to my dad, who was not circumcised, and my grandpa, who was not circumcised. And we talked to the other half of the family, all the guys too. And we got a family consensus before we made a decision. And a lot of people that actually were uncut sat there and said they would have rather they had been cut, because when you get older, it's harder to take care of it downstairs, and it's a pain in the butt. So that's why we eventually went through several people who were uncut wishing they were cut. So that's why we went through the decision we did, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, because you never know in the future. You might have a kid and you might be coming across this conundrum as well, and it's like, you know, it's one of those rough decisions. It's just one of those. Trust me, having kids comes up with all these crazy decisions. Now, interestingly enough, before I leave, and I'm going to talk about the weirdest thing possible right now, because you know me and my weird stories. Well, kind of find out, humans are one of the few mammals that do not have a penile bone. Yes, it's called a baculum, and most creatures have one. Even the cats in my house that are running around like psychopaths right now. Twitch. And they actually have a bone inside their penis. It's called a baculum. And a lot of creatures don't work on hydrodynamics like we do. So it's kind of weird. And they all are very, very strange. Trust me, if you want to have a fun time, Google them. Last time I did it in class, it was absolutely hysterical because I looked it up, and on Etsy, apparently you can buy a raccoon baculum turned into earrings. I'm a strange person, you know, I like weird things, but that was my limit. I am not wearing raccoon baculum in my ears. No. But if you're interested, there is, and you happen to be in the Netherlands, there is an entire museum dedicated to baculi from around the world of all different creatures, including one out of a blue whale that takes up the majority of the museum. So yeah, if you want to go see a whole bunch of actual bones from boners, go to the Netherlands. Or it's in Finland, I think. I'm not looking it up. You can look that up. I'm not going to look that one up. You look that one up. Anyway, so we don't have one. However, you can still break your penis, which is not something that's cool. My mom told me stories. Like I said, she was an EMT paramedic up in New York, and she's seen it. And it isn't like you can put a cast on it. So please be careful, wear a cup. Or do that Chinese karate master thing where you... which I don't think is great, but whatever. So anyway. So again, looking at different parts here, what I was just talking about. Again, we work on hydraulics, whereas other creatures have a little bit of help in there. And they're all differently shaped. A lot of them, and again, it's for a lot of them, if you look at them, they look like back scratchers. And I'm not kidding you. And the reason is because that actually makes it so it stimulates the female during intercourse to release eggs. We don't really have to worry about that too much because we automatically release eggs. But in some mammals, the female has to be stimulated to release their egg, or they won't release it at all, which is why they don't get periods out in the wild. We have that because we just release our eggs automatically. We women don't really have entirely any control over that. It's just like, it's happening, which is why we have to do a whole lot of figuring and planning and figuring it out. So again, the fun part of the book that it explains these subjects in the most clinical way possible, which is kind of like, okay. So erection, of course, the vascular spaces within erectile tissue become engorged with blood when the male becomes sexually stimulated. Erection is caused by an increase in arterial flow, filling the erectile tissues, compression of veins, thus trapping blood in the penis. Again, we're working on hydraulics versus where other creatures are actually have an actual bone in there, which is just weird to when I first learned that. So that's why I'm passing it on to you, so you can sit there and go, God, now that's stuck in my brain forever. Thanks. Because if I have to suffer, so must everyone else. Kidding. Anyway, emission, of course, movement of semen from the epididymis to the urethra, ejaculation, forcible movement of semen from the urethra to outside of the body. This is accomplished by the muscles surround, hi Monty, what? The curia and the bulbs. And orgasm is the culmination of sexual stimulation accompanied by the voluntary rhythmic contractions of the epididymis, causing emission and ejaculation of semen, resulting in a sense of psychological and physiological release. Thank you. Awkward. Anyway, fun fact about erections too, and I wasn't just talking about, that. It is a weird story on how, oh gosh, what is it? It's a very strange story on how, Viagra came to be. So let me tell you the story of Viagra, because it has everything to kind of do with this. Viagra was actually originally developed to be a heart medication. It was supposed to help the heart, especially people right after having a heart attack, because it was supposed to open up all the everything relax, and therefore all the vasodilation open up. So it's supposed to make, everything easier for the heart to heal after a heart attack. That's originally, it was developed for heart attacks. It was a medication developed for that. And so they went ahead, it was looking great in, laboratory testing, and it finally got the green light to go to human testing, which is like the third of the 3 testing stages, and it's the hardest to get to. Getting to human testing is pretty darn hard. So, but they got it. They finally got in and they got to human testing, and it was really funny because, so they gave it to, of course, you had the 2 groups. You got the ones that actually got it and the ones that got the sugar pill, the placebo. So that way you can figure out, if it's working or not. Again, always have a control group so you're doing science, and write it down. So what happened with the guys that they noticed it really wasn't doing anything for the heart, but all of a sudden they were all complaining of bradyism, which was basically their penises becoming engorged rather easily. And they were like, oh. And they went in and looked at that, and yeah, lo and behold, it wasn't doing anything for the human heart whatsoever, but it was fixing downstairs issues. And that's literally how they rearranged the drug and then came out with and said, hey, we just made something to help erectile dysfunction. Isn't that cool? And it was originally a heart medication. So there you go. There's the story of Viagra, where it came from, and all the other erectile dysfunction drugs. It all actually started with heart attack medication. Isn't that weird? So there you go. All right, hormones. So remember those hormones we talked about? They're back. So anyway, at puberty, so the hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin-releasing hormone and basically targets a male's anterior pituitary gland. And these 2 glands, of course, secrete 2 gonadotropins, which is the follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, which we've already talked about. And these, in turn on male sex hormones, which are the androgens. So testosterone is the major androgen, and it begins usually at puberty. We actually have it evenly throughout when we're born up until, but this is when it spikes and it overtakes estrogen. And basically it targets their secondary sex organs of the males, so that way you grow facial hair, and then hair on your pectoral and inguinal hair follicles, which is always fun. And then bone and muscle. So you got, and it actually thickens the vocal cords of your larynx, so therefore you get the deep, manly voice. But you also have that moment where you crack, and you do the crack. And although on my brother, he only cracked for like 1 day. Oh, my husband's home. Honey, how long did your voice crack? He doesn't remember. Anyway.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. He doesn't remember. So, yeah. I just remember my brother's voice cracking for one day, and that was the only day I could make fun of him, going, "Ah, your voice is cracking," and then he was just like, "Shut up," and I was like, "Hee hee." So anyway, the older sister. It's an older sister thing. You gotta tease your younger brother. It's a thing. It's a thing. Anyway, sexually transmitted infections are passed during sexual intercourse and may go undetected for many years. A lot of these share symptoms. I do have fuzzy versions of these, and I don't mean I have them myself. I did that accidentally once. In the middle of lecture, I said, "Yeah, I have chlamydia," and I meant, you've seen me with my plushie versions of these things, because I actually have the chlamydia, and I said I have chlamydia, and somebody goes, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm like, no, I have the fluffy version. I do not have chlamydia. I have the cute fuzzy version that you can buy from the giantmicrobes.com. Anyway, these are the ones you want to buy, not the real ones. So anyway, AIDS, HIV, chlamydia, genital herpes. Now this is the one that is really a silent one. A lot of people actually get genital herpes or HPV, the human papillomavirus, pretty easily. I mean, warts on the toes. My son just developed a wart on his toe, and that's HPV right there. Yeah, warts are just actually a virus that dug into your skin. It's interesting. So genital herpes are actually, out of all of these, is the most prevalent, because he really doesn't bug you. He really doesn't do anything. He just hangs out and occasionally gives you bumps. So it's insane, which is why when the HPV vaccine came out, I was thrilled. A lot of people are carrying this around, and a lot of people don't realize they have it, and that's why it's transmitted so readily, and that's why, honestly, I am one of those people that are, yes, HPV vaccine. I got it myself. I got the first round, which was the series of 3 shots, and they're honestly the only shots that I can say for a fact hurt like the dickens. Oh, God, they hurt. I don't know about you, if you also got HIV, because it has to be kept cold. It was kind of like, the shots for COVID. It had to be kept, some of them, especially the beginning rounds, had to be kept super cold. And when they inject something that's super cold versus room temperature, it burns. Anyway, so yeah, those 3 shots put me off a lot, made me shot shy, if that makes sense. Other than that, I've never had a problem getting shots, but those hurt. I hope the newer versions don't, because, when my son hits a certain age, he's definitely getting that. Anyway, gonorrhea, syphilis. Syphilis is how everybody's most famous gangster, Al Capone, died. He got syphilis. Or was it gonorrhea? No, I think it was syphilis. Unfortunately, back in the Victorian Edwardian era, people used to think that the way to cure these was to have sex with a virgin, which, FYI, no, that just gives it to the virgin. So, yeah. And unfortunately, that thought process still is prevalent in certain countries in the world. So, yeah, virgins are not going to fix your problems. They're just not. So, FYI, virgins do not cure sexually transmitted diseases. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But anyway, with that said, again, he goes over to reproductive system. Now, he did it backwards. He did ladies first and then guys, so that's why it's like that. I decided to go guys first, then girls. Because then, trust me, in the next chapter, I'm going to sit there and talk about all sorts of crazy things. So with that said, I'll see you in the next part where we get to pick on us ladies. So see you next time.